public can't join us in person tonight, our meetings remain open to the public via the live stream on our website, and I extend a warm welcome to all of you who are watching. Before we commence our council meeting this evening, I would like to point out that next Wednesday, the 19th of May, is Wear It Orange Wednesday, a national day of thanks to recognise the tireless work of the State Emergency Service volunteers who serve the community through flood and storm emergencies. We thank all our Victorian SES volunteers for their invaluable contribution to our communities, and you'll note tinges of orange throughout the chambers tonight to show our thanks and gratitude to those volunteers. I'd also like to take this opportunity to highlight Council's support of this year's Midsummer Festival and the LGBTIQA+ community. The City of Moonee Valley embraces and respects all forms of diversity and is a strong ally for the LGBTIQA+ community. We believe that everyone has the right to feel safe, supported and connected in their community. To show support to our LGBTIQA+ community and the Midsummer Festival, Council hosted a number of events throughout Moonee Valley over the past week, including roving performances by the Love Heart Dancers in the Essendon North Business District, Drag Queen Storytime at the Avondale Heights Library. We've got a drag sing-along on Saturday the 22nd of May at the Clock Tower Centre Cafe and Children's Space, and we will also be participating in the Pride March. Item 2 on the agenda is our reconciliation statement, and on behalf of Moonee Valley City Council, I respectfully acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land on which Moonee Valley is located, the Wurundjeri Woi-wurrung people of the Kulin Nation, and we pay respects to their spirits, ancestors, community members and elders past, present and emerging. We also extend this respect to other Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people. Item 3 is apologies and leave of absence, and councillors, I have not received any apologies for tonight's meeting. Item 4, confirmation of minutes, and councillors, I will ask for a mover and seconder that the minutes from the council meeting held on Tuesday the 27th of April 2021 be confirmed. Moved Councillor Bedio, seconded Councillor Hodgson. I'll put that to the vote. All those in favour, and that's carried unanimously. Item 5 is declarations of conflicts of interest. Does any councillor have a conflict of interest in any item on the agenda this evening? There being none, we move to item 6, presentations. And councillors, do we have any presentations this evening? Councillor Hodgson.
Thanks, Mayor. I just wanted to make a verbal presentation about a special event last Sunday, the 2nd of May. The Rotary Club of Flemington and Kensington hosted a planting down at Fairbairn Park of over 480 plants for their 100 years trees for 100 years forest. So this was in recognition of 100 years of the Rotary Club in Australia, similar to, I think we had a presentation at the last meeting of a plaque unveiling in Woodlands Park. There was a plaque and a forest planted down at Fairbairn, an army of volunteers with those plants being planted in record time. I nearly missed it. I managed to get my son and I planted one tree before they were all gone, but it was a really incredible event. The Moonee Valley Sustainability volunteers were down at the same time doing a clean-up of the riverbank. It's really amazing to see so many community members out there doing something for the environment, and also the Rotary Club celebrating 100 years of community service. They do so much for our community, and it's really so amazing that there will be a forest there to recognise their contribution.
Thank you, Councillor Hodgson. Any other presentations from councillors? Councillor Byrne?
Thanks, Mayor. Just briefly, Councillor Ava and I were fortunate enough to attend the ALGA conference last Saturday, which was really exciting. So I'd like to say thank you to the ALGA executive and committee and the City of Yarra who hosted. It was really good to see them get behind women in local government Obviously here at Moonee Valley we've had a female majority for quite some time, which is quite rare when you actually speak to other councils. So there were some really fabulous guest speakers, and it would be really exciting, I think, one day to see Moonee Valley host a similar event. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Byrne. Any other presentations? If not, I will just briefly note that the CEO and I had the pleasure today of attending Government House for the 50th anniversary celebration of the Caroline Chisholm Society. The Caroline Chisholm Society do some great work with vulnerable mothers and work with mothers in the first 1,000 days of the infant's life. They've recently built new headquarters on Mount Alexander Road. I think that was 2018. They made their permanent home here in Moonee Valley, so it was an absolute honour for myself and the CEO to meet the Victorian Governor, Linda DeSalle, and to celebrate the amazing work that the Caroline Chisholm Society does within our community. We did get presented with a history book on the Caroline Chisholm Society, which we'll leave in the Councillor Support Office should any councillors wish to view it. Item 7 on the agenda is petitions and joint letters, and I understand we have one petition to be presented this evening. Call on Councillor Isa.
Thank you, Mayor. Yes, a petition's been received with 52 signatures requesting Council to improve the usability and functionality of Canterbury Street Stables, Flemington, by installing barbecues for residents to enjoy with their family and friends. I'd like to move the officer's recommendation that Council resolves to receive and note the petition requesting barbecues in Canterbury Street Stables, Flemington, refer this matter to the Director of Service Delivery for investigation and reporting back to Council, and C, advise the petition organiser accordingly.
Thank you, Councillor Isa. Do I have a seconder for that motion? Councillor Hodgson. Councillor Isa, did you wish to speak to the petition?
Oh, just very briefly to thank John and Mary, who I met during the week, who spoke to many neighbours about their ideas for improving the gardens that surround the Canterbury Street Stables. It's one of those very historic and original buildings in Flemington that really pays homage to Flemington's history, and there are some improvements that can be made in that space. Whether those improvements end up being more garden related or some exercise equipment has also been suggested, or barbecues. Look forward to hopefully progressing this in some way. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Isa. Councillor Hodgson, put that to the vote. All those in favour? That's carried unanimously. Item 8 is public question time, and we have received 12 questions from members of the community for tonight's meeting. As we do not have residents in the public gallery, I propose we move to suspend the provisions in our governance rules requiring questioners to be present in the gallery. That will enable me to read the questions that have been submitted in advance and for the CEO to read the responses. Councillors, may I please have a mover that Council resolves to temporarily suspend the public question provisions in its governance rules to allow questions from the gallery to be read by the Mayor and responses read out by the CEO. Councillor Bettio, seconded Councillor Adams. I'll put that to the vote. All those in favour? That's carried unanimously. So the first question for this evening is from Matthew Galea. Matthew's question reads, what is the mechanism that allows cricket to be allocated facilities during the winter season? I'll pass to our CEO, Helen Sui, to respond.
Thank you, Matthew. Through the Mayor, Council provides sporting clubs the opportunity to request access to grounds twice a year. This being for the summer season, which is October to March, and winter season, April to September. The requests are then assessed considering a variety of factors, including the playing surface suitability and associated infrastructures, such as access to pavilions and lights, the numbers of teams of the clubs, and historic allocations of the Moonee Valley clubs. The mechanism to which the cricket has use of Moonee Valley grounds during the winter season is through this seasonal allocation process. Thank you.
Thank you, CEO. The second question also comes from Matthew Galea, and it reads, given the clear and demonstrated history of Council making ground allocations to cricket during the winter season, Do councillors believe that the policy that relates to allocations being made on a summer and winter basis is applied fairly and equally to all sports in the Moonee Valley? I'll pass it to our CEO, Helen Sui, to respond.
Thank you, Matthew. Through the Mayor, I will address how the policy is applied from an officer's perspective. However, I cannot provide comments on councillors' opinion in this regard. The process aims to treat clubs fairly and equitably. It is noted that Moonee Valley experiences more demand for sports grounds and associated infrastructure than we are capable of supplying. This means that each season, not all clubs' requests can be accommodated. This is further complicated by different sporting needs based on the code's requirements. Council has made a commitment to review and update the seasonal allocation policy and report back to Council. Clubs will be provided the opportunity to propose solutions and give feedback during this process. Thank you.
Thank you, CEO. The next question this evening comes from David Ryan. David asks Council, Sherbourne Street residents have been asked to wait for the results of the traffic study done in February and have been waiting for months for it to be completed. This study has now been completed, and from what I have seen, it has confirmed what Sherbourne Street and Stanley Street residents have known for more than 2.5 years, that the opening of Sherbourne Street from Buckley Street has drastically and dangerously increased traffic in both Sherbourne and Stanley Streets, which are too narrow and already had too much traffic, too many children and pedestrians to safely handle this huge increased traffic. I would like to know if the Council has had any recent contact with the Department of Transport to discuss this issue, and or what would be the timeline with respect to efforts to ask the Department of Transport to close Sherbourne Street at Buckley Street. I'll pass to our CEO, Helen Sui, to respond.
Thank you, David. Through the Mayor, Council has been in contact with the Department of Transport and has received the in-principle support for making Sherbourne Street exit only at Buckley Street. As you are aware, Sherbourne Street and many of the surrounding streets near Eastern Station are still under the control of the Level Crossing Rail project. Council is working with the relevant parties to progress our proposed works within them. Changes to road conditions, such as the proposed partial road closure, is associated with DOT's statutory steps, including a public consultation process. The affected residents will hear from Council before the formal commencement of this process. Council anticipates progressing this statutory process in July 2021. Thank you.
Thank you, CEO. The second question from David Ryan reads, I have seen some information from the traffic study done in February that confirms the concerns of Sherbourne Street residents, but there was still a lot that was left unanswered. Sherbourne Street residents would like to see all of the data that was received by the Council. Can the traffic study that was conducted in February be made available in full to the public? I'll again pass to our CEO, Helen Sui, to respond.
Thank you, David. Through the Mayor, I believe this information has already been provided to you. Thank you.
Thank you, CEO. The next question tonight comes from Antti Stipich. Antti asks, why do sports codes such as AFL, cricket, baseball and hockey have full 12 months access to grounds including pavilions and never have to pack their memorabilia away, but soccer clubs have only a 6-month allocation and forced to take down and store all club items away? I'll pass to our CEO, Helen Sui, to respond.
Thank you, Antti. Through the Mayor, generally there are 2 types of agreements in place for use of community assets managed by Council for our sporting clubs. One is a lease agreement and the other is a seasonal allocation agreement. Sporting clubs on lease agreements have access to pavilions 12 months of the year. Currently, there are a range of different sporting codes that have lease agreements in place. Sporting clubs on a seasonal allocation agreement, which includes multiple sporting codes, are only provided access for the season they have requested and approved. the terms and conditions and responsibility sharing and investment in assets between council and clubs is different between the two models, with more responsibility on clubs with leases. Thank you.
Thank you, CEO. The second question from Auntie Stipich reads, why is it taking 7 months for council to certify floodlights at Strathnava Reserve Strathmore that has impacted the club's ability to fixture pre-scheduled night games for its senior men's and women's teams, that has resulted in game postponements since the commencement of the season? I'll again pass to our CEO, Helen Sui, to respond.
Thank you, Auntie Susan Mayor. The lighting infrastructure at Strathnava Reserve cannot be certified as compliant at this time because the illumination level has fallen below the approved standard for competition. To fix this, it is necessary to replace several of the lamps in the light towers. Due to there being no available stock in Australia, lamps were required to be imported, and shipments have been delayed. Council acknowledges the negative impact on Strathmore FC split and its night competition. Officers will work with its contractor to ensure the situation is resolved as quickly as possible. Thank you.
Thank you, CEO. The remaining questions this evening relate to the Better Boating Victoria proposal to construct a boat ramp and adjacent infrastructure at the Maribyrnong River near the Newsom Street footbridge. The following two questions come from Catherine Hollywell. Catherine asks Council, does Moonee Valley Council own the land adjacent to Newsom Street Bridge upon which the Better Boating Victoria ramp development is proposed? And if so, is there an understanding with the state government or Better Boating Victoria, or has any application been made by Better Boating Victoria or the state government to council to obtain or use the land for this purpose? Pass to our CEO, Helen Sui, to respond.
Thank you, Catherine. Susan Mayor. Council owns the land adjacent to the Newsom Street Bridge where the boat ramp and car park is proposed. Council has no formal role in the process until a planning permit application is received. Council to date have not received application to use the land as a boat ramp or the associated car parking. Due to the statutory role Council needs to play in a future planning permit application process, Council must maintain an arm's length position to ensure the integrity of the process. Thank you.
Thank you, CEO. Catherine Hollywell's second question reads, can you please confirm that once the state government Better Boating Victoria boat ramp project submission is received by Council, that this will be an application that will be advertised by Council and on which community input will be sought, allowing appropriate time for review and submissions to be made? Also, that the community organisation Stamp Out the Ramp at Newsom, of which I'm a representative, will be advised when the application is to be advertised. I'll again pass to our CEO, Helen Sui, to respond.
Thank you, Catherine. Susan Mayor. Should the application for the boat ramp be lodged with Council, there will be advertising and consultation to understand community input with appropriate time for submissions as part of a usual planning permit assessment process. Community organisations will be notified. Thank you.
Thank you, CEO. The next question comes from Philip Bolton. Philip asks, I understand that multiple council staff and possibly councillors have been seen to be engaged in meetings with Better Boating Victoria over a considerable period of time, certainly longer than a year. If this is the case, who has been involved, when and why? I'll pass to our CEO, Helen Sui, to respond.
Thank you, Philip. Through the Mayor, it is usual for state government to approach local councils well ahead of formalising proposals for projects such as this. The boating ramps were a state government election promise, and Better Boating Victoria has sought input from council officers and presented information to councillors to provide background to what they are trying to achieve. These meetings are useful for local councils, as council staff can identify issues and reiterate the importance of undertaking extensive community consultation prior to lodging any application with council. This was what Council advised Better Voting Victoria during our meetings. Thank you.
Thank you, CEO. The next question also comes from Philip Bolton, and it reads, in a Better Voting Victoria online meeting on the 3rd of May 2021, Better Voting Victoria advised that 5 other sites on the Maribyrnong River have been rejected prior to identifying the Newsom Street location. Is Council or staff aware of or prepared to seek the data underpinning the reasons why these 5 other sites are now unsuitable, and consider the relevance of these data and reasons to the Newsom Street site? I'll again pass to our CEO, Helen Sui, to respond.
Thank you, Philip. Through the Mayor, Council has repeatedly advised Better Voting Victoria the significant community interest of the Riverside precinct, and have been encouraging BBV to consider a range of alternative sites. Upon request, Council has been advised that alternative sites are not suitable for the needs of BBV. Thank you.
Thank you, CEO. The next question comes from Wojtek Mikalski, who asks Council, in the Better Voting Victoria online meeting of 3rd of May 2021, Ms Catherine Gretsch of Better Voting Victoria advised that Better Voting Victoria had proposed 12 car and trailer parking bays at the Newsom Street site, and that this was increased to 22 parking bays following advice from Council staff. My question is who from Council made this request, and when, exactly why, and upon what data was this request made?
Thank you, Wojtek. Through the Mayor, Council officers have not directed Better Voting Victoria to a specific number of car parking spaces. Better Voting Victoria have discussed with Council the proposal, and Council staff have raised concerns, including traffic and general amenity issues. If and when Better Voting Victoria finalise the proposal and submit to Council, officers will undertake a assessment of the car parking requirement as part of the planning permit application assessment process. Thank you.
Thank you, CEO. The final question for this evening also comes from Wojtek Mikalski, and it reads, the Manager Community Development at Council has advised in writing that, quote, from a community engagement perspective, Better Voting Victoria is conducting a series of consultation sessions to consider the views of the community, end quote. He also states that, quote, Council will separately consult with user groups in the community to formalise concept drawings to minimise confusion between the boat ramp and golf course projects, end quote. Does this mean that Council is already incorporating the boat ramp development into future planning decisions? And if this is the case, why is this being done before Council has engaged with the community? I'll again pass to our CEO, Helen Sui, to respond.
Thank you, Wojtek. Through the Mayor, Council is not a party to this project, as no application has been formally lodged with Council. Should Better Voting Victoria decide to lodge an application, Council will consult with the community and user groups as part of the planning permit assessment process. Thank you.
Thank you, CEO. Item 9 on the agenda tonight is reports from delegated committees, and we have none. So we move to item 10, Council reports. First item, 10.1, Financial Performance Report, March 2021. Councillors, do I have a motion? Councillor Hodgson.
Thank you, Mayor. I'd like to move the officer's recommendation with an additional point F that reads, request that officers review and report back to Council on the payment assistance policy and debt collection procedures for rates and charges, with the view to updating these to improve the support for any ratepayer who needs additional assistance and improve the accessibility of information relating to the policy.
Thank you, Councillor Hodgson. Do I have a seconder for that motion? Councillor Adams. Councillor Hodgson, would you like to speak to the motion?
Thanks, Mayor. So this report is a standard reporting item that we see each quarter, but I just wanted to use my time to speak to the point C and my additional point F, because in April 2020 we saw Council adopt the financial hardship policy, which provided access for financial relief for residents during the state of emergency in response to the current pandemic. and interest on outstanding debt was waived during that period. But in line with the end of the state of emergency in Victoria, Council will recommence charging interest on debt owed by residents effective from the 1st of July this year. I just wanted to note that although the state of emergency is concluding, our community is still suffering the economic and financial hardship that the pandemic has caused. And indeed, other factors are causing hardship in our community, which fall outside the pandemic and state of emergency. So one of the things that the finance report notes is that we've been seeing an upwards trend in outstanding debts, and that predates, I think, the pandemic. It was certainly, the trend was continued to be observed through the pandemic, but I don't think that we can attribute the trend just to the impacts of COVID-19. So I know that the officer's report indicates that Council will undertake extensive communication and engagement to alert residents to the change, the recommencement of charging of interest, and that will take the form of touching base with those residents who do have an outstanding debt, encouraging them to enter into a payment plan if that will assist them to smooth out their rates bills, making sure that they have applied for any concessions that they may be eligible for, and also, follow-up letters, emails, phone calls to make sure that everyone understands what assistance is available to them. So I please encourage everyone who might be affected by this to reach out to the Council if you've got any questions, if you want to understand what avenues are available to you. But I also want to note that if our residents are experiencing difficulties, we want our Council to be able to make things easier, which is why I've added some additional wording there to make sure that Council's making information readily available, either through our website or other means, potentially also in other languages if there are language barriers, and also looking at how we can improve our processes and support our residents when they need it most. I think when it comes to seeing people who are unable to, having difficulty making their rates payments, we want to see better outcomes, and I think we'll be able to do that if we engage with our residents who are experiencing those difficulties. I'm particularly keen to see that Council's in a position to respond to situations that might be more complex, and where additional support might be needed, even if that goes beyond financial support. There are definitely ways that industry has been responding to people experiencing financial hardship that I think Council can look to and learn from, and I'm really confident that our officers will be able to review our current policies and processes and suggest ways that we can better respond to the needs of our rates payers.
Thank you, Councillor Hodgson. Councillor Adams, would you like to speak to the motion?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. The issues impacting the Council's finances for the remainder of the 2020/21 remain consistent with earlier reports. It's okay.
Sorry, carry on. Councillor Adams, you're not clearing the building.
And Councillor Hodgson has already highlighted the financial hardship policy, so I'll just comment on one noteworthy item. That on the 23rd of June 2020, Council resolved to adopt the annual budget 2020/21, which included borrowings of $10 million during the 2021 financial year to support the budgeted capital works for the East Keilor Leisure Centre redevelopment. Council officers have sought the required borrowings via the Community Infrastructure Loan Scheme, which aims to provide Victorian councils with access to low-interest Victorian government guaranteed loans to support the delivery of community infrastructure through Treasury Corporation of Victoria. This loan was successfully applied to the project for East Keilor Leisure Centre redevelopment of $10 million, with documentation for the TCV loan agreement initiated. So this recommendation resolves to delegate authority to the CEO to execute all relevant documentation relating to that $10 million of borrowings. I'll also note that the financial report for the period the 1st of July 2020 to 31st of March 2021 forms part of the public accountability process and reporting and includes the following financial statements, being the operating statement, the balance sheet, cash flow statement and capital expenditure. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Adams. Any other councillor wish to speak to this motion? Councillor Isa?
I thought that was the cue for the SES to come in and rescue us, Mayor, but I've got my chainsaw anyway. I'd just like to speak briefly just to acknowledge that the executive team are doing, and also people who work with them are doing considerable work to improve our reporting practices at council, and there is quite a bit of work to do, and note very much that the way in which some of the capital works projects have been reported at the moment perhaps doesn't give the true and accurate picture as to how all of those projects have been funded through different budget cycles and the way that expenditure is all tracking. And again, just thank the CEO for taking the time to look through our processes with a fine-tooth comb and continue to improve those so that we can be really confident at council about the way in which our money is being spent and the way in which our projects are being managed. And it's an ongoing task, and look forward to our new budget demonstrating those improvements. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Isa. Any other councillor wish to speak to the motion? If not, Councillor Hodgson, would you like to close?
Oh, Mayor, thank you. I just had one more comment to make, which was to highlight the point E, the property sale reserve guidelines, which is a really great initiative brought to us by officers to allow for planning for strategic property purchases. I know that council has a significant property portfolio, and this is a great initiative to make sure that we're making the most of that.
Thank you, Councillor Hodgson. I'll put that to the vote. All those in favour? It's carried unanimously. Item 10.2 on the agenda is Councillor Expenses Quarterly Report. Councillors, do I have a motion? Councillor Bedio.
Thank you, Mayor. I wish to move that the Councillor Expenses Report for Quarter 2 and Quarter 3 for 2020-2021 period be deferred to a future council meeting incorporating Quarter 4 reporting as an end of financial year total summary to address incorrect reporting figures.
Thank you, Councillor Bedio. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Tyson. Councillor Bedio, do you wish to speak to the deferral?
Don't have much to add other than it's been brought to the attention of councillors that there may be some errors that there were some errors in the quarterly report, and to best address those errors, it would be prudent to combine the Quarter 2, Quarter 3 and Quarter 4 reports and submit them as end of financial year report.
Thank you, Councillor Bedio. Councillor Tyson, wish to speak to the item?
Nothing to add.
Any other councillor wish to speak? I'll put that to the vote. All those in favour? All those in favour? Councillor Adams, Councillor Bedio, Councillor Byrne, Councillor Hodgson, Councillor Nation, Councillor Isa, Councillor Sharpe, Councillor Tyson. Those against? Councillor Sui. That is carried. Item 10.3 is determination of councillor and mayoral allowances. Councillors, do I have a motion? Councillor Isa. The motion? The motion?
I'm sorry, Mayor, I'd like to move the officer's recommendation.
Thank
Sorry.
you, Councillor Isa. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Hodgson. Councillor Isa, do you wish to speak to the motion?
Oh, look, of course, it's slightly awkward to move the motion around the allowances for councillors and Mayor. This is the closure of the loop. Earlier this year, we put forward for public consultation the allowances, and no submissions were received in response to that, and so this is now coming back to council for approval, and obviously acknowledge that it's, as I say, it's slightly awkward to approve the amount of money that will be paid for our service. I hope that we do a sufficiently good job that all of our constituents and ratepayers think that the remuneration is at least fair and reasonable for the work that we're doing for you. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Isa. Councillor Hodgson, wish to speak to the motion?
No, thank you, Mayor.
Any other councillor wish to speak to the motion? I'll put that to the vote. All those in favour? Councillor Adams, Councillor Bedio, Councillor Byrne, Councillor Hodgson, Councillor Nation, Councillor Isa, Councillor Sharpe, Councillor Tyson. Those against? Councillor Sui. That is carried. Item 10.4 is council meeting change of date. Councillors, do I have a motion? Councillor Tyson.
I'll move the officer's recommendation.
And I have a seconder. Councillor Byrne. Councillor Tyson, do you wish to speak to the motion?
So this is just a procedural motion required to move the date of the council meeting due to a few councillors who won't be able to attend due to a conference.
Thank you, Councillor Tyson. Councillor Byrne, wish to speak to the motion? Any other councillor wish to speak to the motion? I'll put that to the vote. All those in favour? It's carried unanimously. Item 10.5 on the agenda is membership of new Intermetropolitan Advocacy Partnership. Councillors, do I have a motion? Councillor Byrne.
Thanks, Mayor. Happy to move the officer's recommendation.
Thank you, Councillor Byrne. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Hodgson. Councillor Byrne, do you wish to speak to the motion?
Thank you, Mayor. I truly believe that this is something that is really exciting for the City of Moonee Valley. For many years, we have been trying to work with our partners, with the inner city Melbourne councils, and this is definitely a step in the right direction to do that. IMAP was established in 2005 and consisted of the City of Melbourne, Port Phillip, Stonnington, Yarra and Maribyrnong, and they share a lot of similarities with what we do. And we're obviously a part of Lead West, so we advocated along with the cities of the West, which is great, and we still have a really good working relationship, and it's really important that we continue that working relationship even though we're not technically a part of Lead West anymore. But a lot of the Lead West advocacy things were due to their extensive growth corridors, particularly in the City of Wyndham and the City of Melton, whereas where they're going out, we're going up. So instead of us putting our advocacy dollars towards Lead West, we're going to be putting less advocacy dollars, but towards the M9, which will be the councils that I spoke of before, but also to be invited have been Hobsons Bay, Moreland and Darebin. And it's going to be a really exciting advocacy arm where we can work together and be a really, really strong voice about Greater Melbourne. So I'm looking forward to shared advocacy with these big powerhouse councils, and it'll be interesting to see where we go from here. So this is to agreeing to join the group with shared advocacy, and for to delegate the CEO to enter into an MOU with other participating councils. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Byrne. Councillor Hodgson, do you wish to speak to the motion?
Thanks, Mayor. Look, just to echo Councillor Byrne's comments that this is a really exciting opportunity for Moonee Valley. I know that the Mayor and CEO have attended some really productive preliminary meetings around what those shared advocacy projects might be, and have been really excited to report those back to councils. So looking forward to see what comes of it.
Thank you, Councillor Hodgson. Any other councillor wish to speak to this motion? If not, Councillor Byrne, you wish to close? I'll put that to the vote. All those in favour? It's carried unanimously. Item 11.1, item 11, notices of motion, and councillors, we have 2 notices of motion tonight. 11.1 is notice of motion number 2021/13, good governance. I call on Councillor Sharpe to present her notice of motion.
Thank you, Mayor. Yes, take notice at the meeting of council. It is my intention to move. The council resolves to ensure all councillors undertake governance training by 30th of June 2021. in regards to our Code of Conduct, particularly focusing on Section 2 of the Code relating to standards of conduct, i.e. A, treatment of others, B, performing the role of councillor, C, compliance with good governance measures, and D, a councillor must not discredit or mislead council or the public.
Thank you, Councillor Sharpe. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Sui. Councillor Sharpe, do you wish to speak to your notice of motion?
Thank you, Mayor. I'll be quick. Well, I won't be too long. I've put this motion up tonight because, to be quite frank, I'm quite concerned at what I see this rabble of a council is becoming, and it's only been 6 months since the new council team has been elected. Last week's council meeting is a perfect example, as I believe statements were made which were untrue and designed to mislead the public. Namely the statement, "We have a soccer strategy." This council has never endorsed a soccer strategy. However, a report from 9 years ago was emailed to councillors 1 hour before the meeting, and I note the majority of councillors did not even read the document before it was the subject of an amended motion. Considering this report that some councillors voted for was effectively shelved in 2012, as per the minutes of the 2012 meeting, I find it incredibly alarming that decisions in this chamber are being made without having the required information at hand in order to make an informed decision. Also, I note that our government's procedures were not followed, as an amendment is purely an addition or removal of words, not an entirely different motion. Councillor Sui referred this to this last week. He's a councillor of 17 years' experience who was effectively shut down when he was in fact entirely correct. So far, I've witnessed motions being moved to include certain information, to have an amendment put up by another councillor to remove said information, only for that vote to be lost and the councillor who put up the alternative then voting for the original motion to include anyway. So I just wonder, what is the point? In my entire 14 years' experience, I've never been subjected to a gag motion. However, in the last council meeting, councillors effectively tried to gag me 3 times. And the thing is, the topic was soccer, a sport that is loved within Moonee Valley, so why on earth were 3 gag motions required? Personally, I think councillors were just trying to bully me, and I can tell you that I am not going to be bullied. I'm extremely concerned with the effectiveness of the council group that seems to be making decisions based on inadequate information and personal grievances. So I trust that all councillors will undertake and understand what governance actually means, so that we can get back to actually fulfilling our roles and representing the community that elected us to make proper and informed decisions. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Sharpe. Councillor Sui, do you wish to speak to the motion? No? Any other councillor wish to speak to this motion? Councillor Ava?
Mayor, I'd like to move an amendment to the motion, if I may.
Yes, your amendment.
To renumber the motion so that number 1 reads, Council notes that all councillors received governance training through the induction process within the last 6 months. Renumber the next point to number 2, Council resolves to ensure all councillors undertake governance training by 30th of June 2021 in regards to our Code of Conduct, particularly focusing on Section 2 of the Code relating to standards of conduct and the processes and outcomes of breaching these standards, i.e. A, treatment of others, B, performing the role of a councillor, C, compliance with good governance measures, D, a councillor must not discredit or mislead council or the public. And then a new part 3, as a matter of good governance, council resolves to amend the Code of Conduct to include a new clause 4.11 that reads as follows, and to receive training on this requirement, including outcomes of breaching this requirement. And 4.11, role of a delegate or council representative on committees. A councillor appointed as a delegate or representative to an organisation, body or committee will represent any endorsed positions of council and report back to council on the issues, progress and any recommendations of the organisation, body or committee for council to consider. Paragraph 2, motions and business submitted to the State Council of the Municipal Association of Victoria or the National General Assembly of Australian Local Government Association must be endorsed by council prior to their submission. And next paragraph, motions and business submitted to these bodies without council endorsement must be withdrawn.
Thank you, Councillor Isa. So we have an amendment on the floor. I will seek a seconder for that amendment. Councillor Tyson. Councillor Isa, would you like to speak to your specific amendment?
So the amendment, as I say, notes that councillors received governance training as part of our induction process, both in December and at the planning weekend earlier this year. Nevertheless, I think it's always good to have more training and more learning, and I'm certainly here to continue learning and to continue improving my understanding of how our standards of conduct, code of conduct and governance rules operate, and I welcome the opportunity to talk about these further with colleagues and further experts in the field. Also welcome the opportunity to include in the code of conduct something that's become apparent that we may need this particular clause, and it's a really important part of accountability with respect to delegates and representatives. Many of us are representatives on different committees, and our role on those committees is obviously to represent Moonee Valley Council and the positions of council, and then to be accountable for that and report back to our colleagues about that. And it's a position, it operates on trust. It also does need some clear explication, I think, in the code of conduct that those processes and expectations do exist, and that the trust in that representation is an important part of our conduct as councillors.
Thank you, Councillor Isa. Councillor Tyson, do you wish to speak to the specific amendment?
No.
Thank you, Councillor Tyson. Any other councillor wish to speak to this amendment? If not, Councillor Isa, you wish to close? I'll put the specific amendment to the vote. All those in favour? That's carried unanimously. So that becomes the substantive motion. At this stage, the mover, Councillor Sharpe, seconder, Councillor Sui, has spoken. Any other councillor wish to speak to this motion? No? If not, Councillor Isa, right to reply to the amendment. Do you wish to speak?
Yeah, look, I would just speak very briefly, Mayor, that, look, I do think that robust debate is always important in the chamber, and that it's really important that that's conducted with respect and with respect for democracy, such that a vote is taken and that vote's then respected as the position of council. And that's also a really important part of our good governance and of our accountability. As a council group, I probably would characterise us a little bit differently than has been characterised this evening. I think that we are working incredibly hard as a council group, and I think that I'm surrounded by people who are intelligent and rigorous and dedicated and consider each other as colleagues in a very professional sense. I was on council 12 years ago, and it was a vastly different experience. And I am really, acknowledge that we've had some challenging debates in front of us. And I agree with Councillor Sharpe that information before us is terribly important to those debates, and making informed decisions is a really important part of our accountability. But my experience in the last 6 months compared to my experience 12 years ago, I could not be more proud, I think, of the way in which the colleagues that I have, and that I include all of us in that. I think we are all incredibly dedicated to the work that we are undertaking. And people may disagree with some decisions that we make, and that's part of democracy, and I enjoy debating issues and learning more from people all the time.
Councillor.
Sorry, that's a not subtle beep to keep me quiet. Thanks, Mayor. I'll finish there. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Sharpe, would you like to close?
Yeah, just quickly, this isn't about anyone not being dedicated to the role or anything like that. It's purely about what happens around this chamber, and I've been very dismayed about what has been stated, the conversations around the table in the past few weeks, and as I'm highlighted in my speech then about last council meeting, we need to be really on top of making sure we make decisions based on information that is accurate, not hearsay and not the words of just one or two councillors. That's not what we are here to do. We're elected to represent the community fairly and with all the required information, and you can't make decisions unless you have the information in front of you. So I'm happy to support this alternative to look at the council representatives on committees. I don't think that's an issue at all, which is why I supported it. But obviously I just want to make a point that's not about, this motion isn't about anyone's dedication or not. It is about how we actually tackle things and approach things within this council chamber, which has been highlighted to me to be quite deficient. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Sharpe. As his recommendation has several distinct parts, I will split it for the vote, as I am able to as chair under our governance rules. Councillors, I'm putting to the vote part one of the motion, the substantive motion that is before us. I'll put that to the vote. All those in favour? That's carried unanimously. I'll put to the vote part two of the substantive motion before us. All those in favour? That's carried unanimously. And I'll put to the vote part three of the substantive motion before us. All those in favour? And that's carried unanimously. 11.2 on the agenda is notice of motion 2021/14, Flemington Housing Estate, access to offices and community spaces. And I'll call on Councillor Isa to present her notice of motion.
Thank you, Mayor. I would like to move that Council resolves to write to the Minister responsible for housing services on the Flemington Housing Estate to A, request the community roofs and offices at the ground floors of buildings to be reopened to tenants and users with advice to users about COVID-safe practices and requirements, and B, request the provision of a regular on-site mobile office of department or agency staff to assist residents of the housing estate with maintenance and tenancy issues.
Thank you, Councillor Isa. I'll ask for a seconder. Councillor Hodgson. Councillor Isa, do you wish to speak to your notice of motion?
Thank you, Mayor. There are several rooms at the bottom of 12 Holland Court and 120 and 126 Racecourse Road, which are the high-rise buildings of the Flemington Housing Estate. These rooms have been closed since March 2020, and to date they remain closed. I did check with some friends who live at the housing estate today just to make sure that they weren't miraculously open today, but alas, they are still closed. Now, these are the only spaces on the estate for small gatherings, for meetings, for playgroups, for training, for office work. At the bottom of 12 Holland Court, there are 6 offices that are used by different community groups that people haven't had access to. And those offices have all their paperwork. They have their a great deal of organisational paperwork that hasn't been able to be accessed since March last year. In fact, the locks have been changed so that people can't make their way into those rooms. I've been told by many people that they have spoken to Office of Housing, they've called many times. Someone rang last week, they were told they're soon going to be opened, they will soon be opened, and they just haven't yet been opened. One of the unfortunate things too, people might know that it's Ramadan at the moment, which ends this week. It ends on Thursday. Eid is Thursday. And unfortunately, some of the rooms, particularly those at the bottom of 12 Holland Court, are used for as prayer rooms during Ramadan by elderly and people with disabilities, people who can't get to the mosque. And unfortunately, people haven't been able to use those rooms as they would normally do during the holy month of Ramadan. So it saddens me immensely that the COVID-safe rules have changed across the board. On 9th of April, they relaxed further, yet even in that environment, the COVID-safe settings of the 9th of April, the community facilities and offices that and the settings for those, which are that they are allowed to be open with density quotients, electronic recording and COVID-safe requirements. And so I do think it's time that these offices are opened for residents, and I'd like to ask my colleagues for support in writing to the Minister to request that. The second point is about a mobile office. There is no presence of the Office of Housing on the housing estate. There are numerous maintenance issues that come up for residents, and the only way to access people in person is to go to Ascot Vale Housing Estate, which is a tram ride and a walk to get there. At the moment, there are a number of car parks being removed on Flemington Estate. Car parks, particularly around 126. All of the car parks quite near the building have been removed, and people haven't been able to access any information about what's going on. It would be great if there was someone on site that people could ask questions, could seek maintenance assistance, and could make the experience of living in public housing a more welcoming and more positive experience. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Isa. Councillor Hodgson, wish to speak to the notice of motion?
Nothing to add, thanks, Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Hodgson. Any other councillor wish to speak to the motion? Councillor Isa, do I want to close? I'll put that to the vote. All those in favour? That's carried unanimously. Item 12 is urgent business. Councillors, do we have any urgent business? There being none, item 13 is confidential reports, and there are no confidential reports this evening. So this is where we say good night to those watching the meeting. A reminder, as I mentioned at the start, Wednesday the 19th of May is Wear It Orange Wednesday, where we will be recognising the amazing work the SES do in our community with an event at the Clock Tower. So if on Wednesday you have some orange in your wardrobe, please pull it out, and please jump on the SES Essendon Facebook to send them your message of thanks. I declare the meeting closed. Good night.